Go.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the June 22nd, 2017 Kubernetes Community Meetup. I am your host today, Rob Hirschfeld with RackN. This is part of a rotating duty that we take, and we are always looking for people to help out by moderating the session, taking notes, and providing other services to keep this a community forum. As if you are in the meeting live, then thank you for joining us. We do record these meetings, and there is a YouTube channel, so people who want to participate by remote should be directed to the channel to catch up on past meetings. We also take excellent live notes, and there is a Google page that has all of the notes there live, and the community is welcome to participate in that process. Without further ado, and to keep us running smoothly, I'll go ahead and kick off the meeting. Jace is our primary note taker. Of course, extra comments are welcome. And we have a demo scheduled with Jason Brooks talking about using system containers. Jason, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready. Let me share my screen. All right, is that shared?
Yes.
All right, so just by way of quick introduction, thanks for having me. I work for Red Hat, and I work on Project Atomic, which is like an umbrella project for lots of different containerization stuff, including a lot of Kubernetes things. And so as a big part of that, I work on Fedora Atomic and CentOS Atomic, which are these versions of those distros that are optimized for running containers. And then Kubernetes is the kind of orchestration, choice that we sort of stress for both of those. So the Atomic host uses this called OS tree to manage the system software, and it makes the images. The images are more or less immutable. You can modify them, but that's getting outside the scope of this. But the main way to run your applications or anything to run on there is through containers. And stuff that it doesn't run well in containers, we bake into the image. And so Kubernetes and complementary components like etcd and Flannel and storage clients for like Gluster, things we want to use with Kubernetes that kind of are system level are baked into the image. But we've been working to get those out of the image to make it more flexible, and to you can run different versions, and also if you don't need some of the pieces, it's better to have a smaller image. So we came up with this thing because it can be tough to run certain things in Docker containers, certain system components. We came up with this system containers thing, which is basically it's a Docker container with some extra files in it. Instead of being run by the Docker daemon, it's run with run C. It's managed by systemd, so you can use it as a drop-in replacement for a lot of things. And so one of those things, one of the early things that we did was do etcd and Flannel. And Flannel needs to modify the Docker configuration. If you have Docker set up to use Flannel and Flannel's not going, then Docker won't start. So to run that in Docker was a little bit of a chicken and egg thing. So the system containers, we don't need Docker for them, and so we kind of get around that. So this is just as an example of a system container. This Atomic is a command that does a lot of different things that Atomic hosts, but one of them you can install different types of containers. So this is install system for the system container. The system package thing is kind of a new bit. Basically, if you need to add new files to the host, the way they're working on it is that you can create an RPM that just has those added files, and then I mentioned that the image was immutable, but you can layer packages on, layered on. Anyway, I have that turned off here. So instead of doing that, it just copies the file to the host. And so I think more in the future that'll be an option to, if you want to manage that via RPM, you'll be able to do that with this system package argument. And then we give it a name. You can call it anything. You could have like 5 different etcd system containers running together with different names. I call it etcd, so it's just a drop-in replacement. And then it's just a regular Docker container here. So I had already pulled it, so this would be fast. So basically, it puts the files in place, and then it creates a systemd unit file, and we can just start it up. And you know, there it is running. Let's see. You can. So this is sort of an interesting thing. You're running the container in. So in order to access the etcd control binary inside the container, or to run anything else, you can do this run C exec thing. But, oh, I already did this earlier while getting ready for this. But anyway, you can see that. But I also did this in this case as part of, I mentioned you can copy things onto the host as part of the installation process. And I dropped that binary into user local bin, which on an atomic system, that is a writable location. It's actually, that actually lives at var user local bin. So because I'm using this with Ansible scripts, for instance, and which expect the etcd control to be there to do the configuration. So that was a tweak that I made to the package to make sure that's available. So, and then over here, actually, I have, this is, I'm not running the Ansible here because it takes a bit of time to run, but that first host I was on was a Fedora Atomic host. This is a CentOS Atomic host. It's a similar thing based on CentOS. And I ran these Ansible scripts, the ones that are in the contrib repo, Kubernetes contrib repo, and this is actually a fork of those that instead of, the way the scripts work right now is if you have an atomic host, it expects Kubernetes to be there because we bake it into the image. And this one adds a configuration option that lets you say, I want to run this in a system container. And then if that's there, it will go through. And basically with all the Kubernetes components, it'll do this similar type of command to just install the system component for etcd, flannel, and all the Kubernetes components based on, if it's slated to be an etcd server or a master or a node. So you see here, these are all running in containers, the master components, but there's no Docker containers running. And we have this atomic containers command. And you can see here that etcd, flannel, and the Kubernetes master components are running in these run C runtime. These are running in system containers right now. And then it's a similar thing. On this side, I have I have some containers running. Docker is running the containers that I'm running with Kubernetes. Let's see, I got some pods going. I got a guestbook app running, and then of course the DNS and whatnot are all running. All that stuff is running in Docker containers. But if we do this atomic containers list, you can see, so a bunch of them are running in Docker, and then at the bottom here we've got Flannel, the kubelet, and kubeproxy are running as system containers. And this is kind of cool too, because on CentOS, the version of Kubernetes that we have baked in is a little bit older. It's coming from what RHEL has upstream, and I'm running the current stable because we have that in Rawhide, and I base these system containers on Rawhide. Yeah, and then so I also did a kubeadm system container, and I started out by the way that the kubeadm directions, they have you install RPMs, and so I wanted to, since we don't install RPMs directly on atomic hosts, I wanted to do it with a system container. So I made a container, and again, it's the same command, although I guess I guess I didn't need the system package bit because I didn't add anything. Well, never mind about that. But so I've just installed the system container, and then this is from here. I mean, it's pretty much just like how you do kubeadm, on a regular system. oh, I guess one difference I'll point out is that my container is named kubeadm, but I named the instance of it on my system kubelet, because that's what I want to be able to run. I want to run the kubelet service on my host. Start that. Then I'll do the kubeadm setup. There's a couple things I need to work out to make skip pre-flight checks not necessary. But this just goes through, does your standard kubeadm setup. It'll take just a second. While that's waiting, so this is available on Fedora and CentOS right now. The Atomic client, I was actually testing this just the other day. It builds on Ubuntu, but I think the version of Ubuntu I was using didn't have OS tree. This uses OS tree for its storage of the system container bits. And so I think some things need to be worked out. And really, I would like to see it packaged. But that cross-platform issue was something that it was worth addressing. So I'm just doing this is just setting up Flannel and then setting up a guest instance. But you can see we've got the pods are getting ready to run. Some of them are running, some of them are getting ready to run. And again, we do the Atomic containers list thing. And this time, most of Kubernetes this time is running in Docker, but just the kubelet bit is running in just directly with runc, because that's the system container bit, and then all the rest of it is. So it's one of the things I liked about doing these is that rather than just say your container is privileged or not privileged, you go in and you say these are exactly the capabilities that I'm going to give it. These are the namespaces I'm going to be using. I am maintaining containers, Kubernetes containers in Fedora and CentOS that just basically take the version of Kubernetes that's in those repos and putting it into a regular container. And then on the CentOS side, I've been pointing people to a unit file on the wiki to say, hey, use this. And a big part of this that I'm looking forward to is just being able to say, run this command, and then all that extra stuff that's needed gets rolled in, and plus a few extra things like the etcd control being there. Or I guess another thing is on my master here, and on this kubeadm thing, the kubeadm and the kube control, those are coming from the container, and you can do a symlink into like user local, or you can make a little script that does that runc exec command. So it kind of gives you get to run things in containers, but it gives you a more kind of RPM package-like experience. And then just a few other things. There's a Docker container, a system container, so you can run Docker in the system container itself. And then there's the cryo runtime for Kubernetes. We're working on a system container of that as well. And these containers I did by basically taking other examples and copying them and changing things. But recently there's a build tool to help make it easier to make system containers, and I'll put a link to that in the chat after I get through with that. But that's it for my demo. If there's any questions, I can take those.
Fantastic, thank you. Are there any questions? I didn't see any other than CoreOS wanting to help in chat. Anybody else have questions? No, fantastic. Not sure where we lost Rob, but it appears we lost Rob, so hopefully he will rejoin us.
All right, awesome, thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Jason. Now the question is, can I find the next agenda item? Because I didn't have the agenda open.
I think it's release updates.
Release updates, that's
fantastic.
Then it's Dawn who's up next. The road to 1.7. How are we doing with that? I will get the
Cool,
image up shortly.
So we are doing fine. So far, we have still have the 12 open issue. Most is related to the upgrade test failure and the federation test failure. and some flaky test. But besides the upgrade and the federation test, those we also believe most it is caused by the flaky test. And so yesterday at the burn-down meeting, we asked every representative from all the SIG groups, and they didn't have any signal should be blocked the release at this moment. And we're missing signal from scalability, SIG scalability, and SIG monitoring, and SIG instrumentation. So, and the rest of the SIG actually have the representative there yesterday, and say there's no blocking signal. And then we also have the 12 open pending PR mark for the 1.7 at this moment. And yes, in yesterday burn down meeting, we decided to leave the code freeze once there's the full big PR, API related PR is merged. So today, this morning, and all those 4 PIs merged. And the branch manager did a fast forward last night, very late. And then we are going to leave the code freeze any minutes. But before he leaves the code freeze, here's the one thing we want to announce here, and the email we'll send out. We are going to temporarily make the submit queue is available about less than 1 hour, because there's the one big API refactory. We attach more than 120 files, or maybe I think
it's
the number.
A lot.
Yeah, a lot, pretty much, and they need to be merged. So we are going to make that is go through, then open, because otherwise engineer keep release and couldn't merge their PR. So we are going to temporarily to turn down the submit queue, and the next that is going through, then put back the submit queue. So we are going to, before we take any action, we are going to send the email out. So next one is the release candidate is scheduled, first release candidate for 1.0 is scheduled yesterday, and it's kind of still is because we decided waiting for more stronger signal from the federation test and the aggregate test failure. So so next one, so currently for the upgrade test, we still have the bunch of the open issues. And so we closed so far last weeks, we closed and resolved 9 upgrade related issues. And from 1.5 to 1.7 upgrade, there's still, we decided the 5 tests should be skipped and deleted for upgrade in this upgrade scenario. And there's the still pending issue waiting for the response. And for 1.6 to 1.7 upgrade, there still have, we delete 3 tests and skip all those things. And waiting for 6 resolution. So the top issue based on all those open issue for upgrade, and it is a state for site test. And we need to understand, because at this moment, we don't have the full understanding about the failure yet. So then documentation, we got good feedback after last week announcement at the community meeting. Right now, among all the 26 feature required of the document, we already got the response or open PR, except there's the 3 still waiting for doc PR. One it is API aggregation, another one is encrypted secrets in etcd, and the third one is the stateful site upgrade. So we pretty much hold all the owner, doc owner, and except the API aggregation, we couldn't hold him and say, oh, he's working on the PR at this moment. So the rest of the stuff is okay. So we are going to discuss in today's burn down meeting, we are going to discuss release candidate one more time.
It's coming.
That's excellent. I'm back. Can you hear me?
Yes. Welcome back, Rob.
Yeah, sorry. Apparently, if you're phoned in and Zoom crashes, then it gets very confused about whether you're actually in the meeting or not. So, no surprise. What, Jason, one great demo. One comment for everybody is we do maintain a list of demos at the top of the document. So if you're interested in being one of our future demos, there's 3 scheduled, 4 potentially. But please get your name and demo concept on the list for future. So Don, thank you. Philip, are you, or do we want to go 1.6 or 1.8 first? Why don't we talk? Can we talk 1.8, 1.6 first, and then go futures?
Yeah, let's do that.
All right, Anthony, I'm going to throw you on the spot then.
Michael has one
quick
thing.
thing I have to admit, I try to hold back. Dawn makes this look a lot easier than I think I could ever imagine. And I really just, the amount of effort from the whole team is pretty darn impressive for this release. It really looks like in every release we raise the quality bar. It's gone up yet again. And you know, for those of you who are logged in much later than you should be, early mornings and like late nights, yeah, someone just wrote "Go Dawn." I would love to put that in big figlet and neon lights in the sky and skywriting. It's not just Dawn, but it's amazing. That's all I got.
Awesome. Thank you. And then off to 1.6. So
yeah, just to call out, last week I announced 165, and then right after that meeting I was informed of a security issue. So we put out 166 the next day after that. So the two hot issues to look at if you use Azure Cloud Provider, check the release notes, and also if you use the Google Load Balancer ingress, check the release notes.
Cool. Any other items on 1.6?
No.
Cool. All right.
That's the one with the load balancer fix, right? 166. Okay.
One thing I have to say, just is from a community perspective, the fact that we have different voices, different people running different releases, I find very powerful. So with that comment, Phil, are you ready to talk about 1.8?
Yeah. So to clarify, I'm not running 1.8. I'm just giving an update on some things going on. During the last SIG release meeting, we came up with some ways we could improve the process. I believe two proposals here. One is for ensuring test ownership throughout the development cycle. If we can do this, then when it comes time to do code slush and code freeze, we should all be in a much more relaxed end state. And that's largely situated around SIGs and driving ownership through them. The other is issue management and providing automation around this. We found that a lot of what's being done here is can be automated by a bot, and it's just a human kind of pinging people. And some disadvantages of having a human do it are it's hard to be totally consistent across every issue and every release with how we use labels and how we expect folks to add their issues to the milestone. So by having a bot, one, we can have it always comment with all the instructions, make it really clear, and then we can have it be really persistent about escalating through multiple channels. Whereas it's hard with a human to really follow up through Slack and do all the work that they really should. So if you care about how to get your code in for the release, or if you're probably going to be impacted by test ownership, so definitely read these documents because they're going to impact you.
Are there special SIGs or times when these are being discussed people should be aware of?
Right now, they're just in the PRs. Probably, why don't during one of the SIG release meetings, we'll discuss them. I'll send out an email to the Kubernetes dev and mention the PRs when that is.
So that would be a good place for people to get involved if they want to have a more active role.
If you want to have an active role, for sure, that'd be great. Or you can message me on Slack. If you're just looking to give feedback, just do it right now in the PR.
Perfect sense. Any other items on 1.8?
Not for me, no.
It's coming.
Excellent. All right.
That was one. John's like, what? 1.8 is coming. Yeah.
So with that, we transition the meeting from release topics into SIG updates. We have 2 SIG updates on the calendar. Eric, are you available to talk about SIG Auth?
Yeah, I'm here. So I have some notes, so let me go ahead and throw a link to that into the actual document. 1 second. So I figured that this would be a good time, because of the 1.7 stuff, to go over a little bit about what what features got in through 1.7 that fell under the guides of SIG Auth. So the first one I'd like to talk about is the kubelet TLS bootstrapping and rotation. So what already exists in Kubernetes prior to 1.7 and its work that's been ongoing is this certificates API in Kubernetes. The idea is that when nodes come up, they shouldn't have much secret information, and they need to get credentials from the control plane somehow. So the sort of flows that's been proposed is that we create an API that where nodes can go ahead and create certificate signing requests. You have approvers that are potentially out of tree that might look at information about like the cloud that you're running in or something, and then come through and approve or deny those certificate signing requests. And then something eventually will come along and sign the CSR and allow the nodes to bootstrap credentials into the cluster. Over this release, we moved the kubelet's initial CSR flow out of alpha. So that's now a stable feature flag that we're standing behind for the kubelet. And in addition, we introduced new functionality into the kubelet to have it automatically rotate its client and server certs. So after it gets its initial credentials, the kubelet sort of works on its own and will be able to rotate the server client and serving certs that exists. That work was done primarily by Mike Denise and Jacob Simpson of Google. The second one I want to talk about is a pair of features, a node authorizer and admission plugin. This was contributed by Jordan Leggett of Red Hat. And what this is prior to 1.7 and prior to this feature, kubelets sort of have the ability to read any resource that they could potentially need to access. So an example of this is secrets. Kubelet credentials have historically in Kubernetes been allowed to read any secret in the system. This is obviously really bad because if somebody compromises a node and gets your kubelet credentials, they can dump a lot of data in the Kubernetes API that's potentially very sensitive. So what this change did was it allows the API server to restrict the type of things that kubelets can request. So before, kubelets have the ability to read any secrets on the system, and afterwards, if you turn on and enable this authorizer and admission plugin, the kubelets can only read secrets that they would need to run pods that are scheduled to them. So if I am a kubelet and I have credentials and I'm trying to read a secret that is not associated with the pod that's scheduled for me, I will not be able to perform that action. So compromising a node no longer really means compromising the entire cluster. So that was a new feature added. A caveat of that is that it requires kubelets to be given unique credentials. Depending sort of Kubernetes itself sort of is relatively unopinionated about how you bootstrap credentials or assign credentials to individual nodes. And so it is sort of up to the administrator to ensure that kubelets are given unique credentials. This pairs really well with the TLS bootstrapping work because that will enable that feature and allow kubelets to have unique credentials. The third item I'd like to go over is the API server audit logging. So in a previous release, an audit log was introduced to the API server that would spit out data about every single request that's being made. This is a very convenient thing for if you want to go and debug something, or if you need to have a log of the events that happened in your system. You want to go and audit something post hoc and see what the heck happened. Over this release, that work has continued, and we have been improving the amount of information that is supplied to this audit log. We've let admins be able to filter the actual events that get sent. So there are a lot of uninteresting ones that cause a lot of traffic, like kube proxy watching endpoints or something. And we want to be able to filter, and admins will now be able to filter that out of that audit log saying, that's not relevant to me, or they can say, I only care about events in the kube system namespace. This also added in 1.7 will allow you to hook up a webhook to this. So the the API server has configuration for a webhook that will allow it to send a structured JSON format, this audit log to a remote service. And the idea is that external systems can consume this, store the data, make it searchable in some way that is not just a file on disk that you go and write a regex for and evaluate. So the big run around there is, like, if you're running multiple API servers, you can have them all be sending their audit events to some centralized storage system, and then give access to other people. Finally, the news feature, another new feature for 1.7, and the last one we'll be covering here today, is encryption at rest. So this was contributed by Clayton Coleman of Red Hat, Greg Castle and Seksham Sharam. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. I've not heard that actually spoken. But those two are of Google. And the idea is that the API server can be configured to encrypt the resources before some arbitrary resource before putting it in etcd, or a kind of resource at least. A very obvious use of this is for secrets. So what you will be able to do in 1.7 as an alpha feature is you will be able to provide a configuration file to your API server that specifies symmetric encryption keys for it to use. And as your data goes through the API server, so as I use the secrets API that Kubernetes exposes, the API server will encrypt those before sending it into etcd. So if you somehow get on the machine that etcd is using and read the database, the raw database, you will see junk and not be able to actually view the secrets. So yeah, so there was a bit of other work done, but those were the top ones that I wanted to highlight here. I don't know what the best way, if just keeping the links to the notes works there or not. But if there are any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
And for people that was fantastic, really detailed and some great features. Thank you. There is a link to the notes in the meeting minutes, so please review that. Those are some critical features. Really nicely done.
Awesome.
Any questions, community questions for this before we move on? And of course, participating in the SIG Auth, you want to remind people, Eric, when the SIG Auth meetings are?
Yeah, the SIG Auth meetings are bi-weekly on Wednesdays. We will not be meeting, I think the next meeting is next Wednesday. And if you come to the SIG Auth Slack channel, at the top, we'll link to the meeting notes, which have exact ways of participating and what the times are and what days we're meeting on and like what Zoom thing to join. So SIG Auth Slack channel is a good place to go.
Thank you. All right, Dan, you're on deck. Are you ready?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
We can. So I'm going to turn it over to Dan Williams for SIG Network update.
Actually, Dan, your document doesn't have permissions. If you could.
Yeah, I just did anybody with the link can get it, but let me see if I can change that somewhat. Let's see. Oh, sorry. Anyone?
Wait. And while you're getting staged, we did have one more question on SIG Auth in the channel. Eric.
Okay. Yeah, give me a sec to copy that doc over. Apparently, we can't share docs created with our Red Hat Google accounts outside.
Oh, ouch. So while you get that, the question was, are secrets still kept on the master etcd disk?
Secrets are still kept in, so secrets are still part of the system. This encrypts the current state of systems, or state of secrets. There's a long document in some of the SIG Auth meeting notes about getting secrets to external stores like Vault and other protocols that sort of allow other systems to manage secrets. That is, I will drop that link in, and that's for other releases. That work will be done over the course of the coming release, release after, and so on and so forth, because it's a pretty big item. A link for the current, yeah, I'll link something in here.
Thank you. All right, Dan. And if you want to do the report, and then we'll work on the notes on your.
Yep, just a second, and I'll have that for you.
Okay. Excellent. I'll do a plug for SIG Cluster Ops. In the meantime, we talked about this last week, but we didn't have any. We didn't take any time out of the agenda. So Jason and I, who co-chair Cluster Ops, are looking for people to tell operator stories, both potential operators. So at the last meeting, we had about 30 minutes of discussion about cluster design for somebody who is interested in spinning up cluster. So if you're working on, if you've got a live cluster and want to talk about it, if you're looking at, have questions about how to design a cluster and what things to consider, come to the meeting. We really do want to focus on these stories quite a bit. And then we have a couple other agenda items we keep pushing through, like documentation, breaking issues, features, operator focused on new features and things like that. So. Thanks, Chase. All right, Dan.
Okay, let's try that again. So I have updated the link, and I'll just walk through it really quick. Hopefully people can see that one now. So a couple of weeks ago, I think it was maybe two or three or so SIG meetings ago, maybe this has already been talked about, but we decided to slightly refocus the SIG network to make it much more tactical, I think is the word Tim used to describe it. So, we're now, especially coming up to releases, focusing most of the meeting on things like flakes, open issues, and trying to drill down into those and get people assigned to those, and also focused on triaging the issues and trying to, kind of move the SIG more into more procedural things as opposed to higher level discussions about stuff like multi-network and things like that. So, I mean, some of those higher level issues are still being discussed, but, those are moved more towards the Google Group mailing list as opposed to spending a lot of time in our calls discussing those for now. So with that in mind, talking about the 1.7 release, we have two things that we got in, and one of the big ones was network policy, which is now GA. That finally landed. We had a little bit of a scramble a couple of weeks ago where we needed to redo part of it to satisfy something that I think Clayton brought up around future maintainability. But got that, and that should be in. We have a number of implementations live in various network plugins right now. And so that's something that people can check out in the 1.7 release. So yay for us, I guess, finally getting network policy to GA after probably about a year. And then, of course, the second one there is another feature, the GCP Cloud Provider Source IP Preservation, and that got in as well. So two features, not a ton, but we're working on some other stuff in parallel. In the last 2 meetings or so, we formed an IPv6 working group, and there are a number of open PRs about that which are currently under review and being discussed. Mostly right now, they're focused on getting Kubelet to just be able to register with the API server using IPv6. We haven't yet gotten to the point of actually allowing pods to have IPv6 addresses and passing them back to Kubelet, but that's one of the next steps. We're just trying right now to be able to enable IPv6 communication between Kubelet and some of the API server and other components. On the network plugin side as well, IPv6, at least for CNI, should be supported and available. It's just that Kubelet doesn't do anything with those addresses yet. One of the issues we identified, though, is testing, because a lot of cloud providers, especially Google's infrastructure, doesn't support IPv6 at all or very well. Azure has some issues as well, and AWS has some limitations too. So the problem is that we can't adequately test IPv6 on any of the current public cloud infrastructures. So what the working group is looking into is trying to run minimal tests using kind of like a Docker and Docker scheme where essentially in one VM you just run Docker containers for masters and node, and those Docker containers inside themselves would run kubelet, API server, controller, master controller, etc. And then on the nodes, you actually run a nested Docker container, hence Docker and Docker for the pods. And that's worked out very well for a lot of the testing we do in Red Hat's OpenShift product. If we need to do network testing quickly, that's what we use. And so maybe bringing that over to Kubernetes for the IPv6 testing will work because we can kind of bypass some of the cloud infrastructure. And then, of course, we are still working on multi-network. That's going a little bit more slowly due to some of the refocus, but more use cases keep popping up. And so we're slowly working through some of that. We're probably going to go instead of a more formalized proposal. For now, people are going to test using things like third-party resources and annotations and just try to feel out what some of the most common use cases are. So that's kind of a look at some of the work we have for 1.7 and some of the upcoming stuff too. I think IPv6 support is one of the more energetic things at this point, since there's quite a few people interested in it, and it seems much more immediately achievable than some of the stuff like multiple networks. Any questions?
That's great.
There's one in the chat.
Let me see what's in the chat. It's from Bob. Is there a doc that describes the cross-cloud IPv6 issues?
There isn't a doc yet. Some of that stuff was just raised in the last meeting last week. And so we've been looking into some of those things and doing some research on the different cloud infrastructures. But at least for the Google stuff, as far as we know, you just can't do it. And so based on those anecdotal conversations, we've sort of decided to go look at some of the other stuff. And then when we looked into Azure, and I'm not entirely sure about AWS yet, we found that those were not what would be required for IPv6 testing was not supported by those clouds. But I mean, I guess we could put together a doc, but at this point, I think we're going to try to go forward with the Docker and Docker stuff for now and see what we get with that. It'd
be useful to know, I guess, if the issues that are blocking testing also would limit utility of IPv6 in those scenarios, or is this really a test issue?
It's not just a test issue, because if we can't test it with IPv6 in these cloud providers, then I'm pretty much assuming that we can't even use it in those cloud providers. One of the options is to create an overlay. So obviously you do an overlay that would be IPv6 capable inside the overlay, but would use IPv4. That would be something like VXLAN or Genève, and that would be workable, but that's a lot more infrastructure at this point than we would necessarily want to set up. So that would be the forward path, for the medium term if we can't figure out how to do native IPv6 in some of these instances.
Okay. Sorry, Bob, go ahead. Oh, that's me. Sorry. I'm singing out of my loop. Yeah, so, and if you have questions in the slide, I'm happy to enunciate them. That's not a problem at all. Sorry, and I inadvertently created a loop.
Hey, Eric, since you're on the call, what doc were you asking to be shared?
Sorry, me?
Yep. Sorry, no, Eric Paris.
Okay.
Well, in any case, I can loop back with Eric later.
Also, a question from Bob about if IPv6 isn't working on various public clouds, why so much energy on it right now?
Public cloud obviously is not the only deployment scenario for Kubernetes. Specifically, at Red Hat, we have quite a few customers who are running OpenShift and hence Kubernetes in private cloud. And there are also other places that have less well-known public clouds that want to support IPv6 as well. So I think those are some of the larger drivers there.
So another thing, Sarah, is that if we did have IPv6 support with each node getting a subnet, then essentially all of our issues around having to install virtual networks and all that stuff disappears, right? Because we essentially can route directly to pods without having to do special stuff. So it'd be a beautiful world to live in, and it's kind of chicken and egg.
Okay.
Can we possibly maybe engage with the CNCF or like Red Hat in general just to get environments whereby we can try this out? I mean, if it sounds like the environment is really the main point for both understanding and deploying IPv6 solutions.
Yeah, that's possible. I mean, I think, for OpenShift, a lot of the stuff that we're doing for testing and CI actually still runs on AWS, and we are not doing for OpenShift IPv6 yet. But I think the path forward there, the easiest path forward to reuse some of the existing cluster infrastructure and just logistical setup that we all have on some of the public clouds probably end up being overlay. That might be easier actually than trying to rustle up some other kind of private infrastructure that does natively support IPv6.
Yeah, I agree too, but I also know that there are folks in CNCF who are looking to help contribute too. So this might parallel. Let's talk about this in SIG Network. It sounds really cool.
Fair enough.
Did we lose?
There you go. I just didn't unmute.
Okay.
So there is a hosting company called Packet that I believe is trying to help solve some of this, and they do have IPv6 support. And Joe's entirely right. There's a lot of other providers who do support IPv6, and so it is a relevant conversation. And we were running ahead of time, and then we just had this nice deep discussion. So great questions on that. I was going to ask for an update on the steering committee, and Sarah had offered to do that. And then if you have additional announcements, we have another item on 1.8 release team as a question. And then if you have announcements, we'll try and sneak a couple in. Please add them if you want to speak, so we know to budget time for it. Sarah?
My update is fairly short because you all made comments and we closed comments toward the end of last week on the documents that the Bootstrap Governance Committee created around generating a steering committee. And it is now an action item on this Bootstrap committee to set a meeting, go through and make a second draft of the steering committee charter and an actual timeline to voting. So when are nominations due? When are we going to vote? Who is of standing in the community? So we have to generate also a list for that. I believe actually, Joe, that was one of your items, that you were going to generate the code to pull in all the approvers and owners lists.
I think that was on Tim, but I don't want to sign him up.
Okay, we'll figure that one out.
We gotta figure it out.
Notes.
I was gonna build a tool to actually make. It's a different thing. We'll talk about it later.
Yes.
Okay.
Joe
Yes.
is going to do the tool to sync GitHub
Oh, okay.
constructs and lists and check.
That's
I've been slacking on that, but it's in it's bugging me. It's in the back of my mind.
In the head.
And Tim is generating the list.
Tim is generating the lists. Okay, fantastic. Then I had my action items backwards. Okay, so we need to generate lists of voters. We need to generate
create the form for the exception.
create the form for the exception process.
Nobody owns it.
Yeah. No, that one doesn't have an owner. It's next.
Can someone throw a link in for the? Actually, I could do it for the charter document, because there's still a little bit of activity flittering around on that and comments and discussion. So
Right, because we have not generated a second version, but at this point, I would not recommend writing a bunch more comments in it because we asked that comments be closed on the 15th. So let us iterate it.
comments are closed.
Let us iterate, and then we can go back, because otherwise we can all as a community rat hole, as it turns out.
Yeah, it might. So just stop editing that document, people.
Or just.
I'm as guilty as everybody, but stop editing the document. Let's get the new version out.
Yeah, that is the update on the steering committee, and what is going on is we owe you all a timeline, a second draft, and a more accurate plan at this point.
So people who are waiting on pins and needles on that timeline and nomination process, it hasn't happened yet. You haven't missed anything.
Right, exactly.
Perfect.
You have not missed out on your opportunity to self-nominate or nominate others.
Excellent. And then we added in a 1.8 release team bullet item. What's the discussion on that?
I'm not sure who added that in.
I added that. I was just curious if we had who's on the release team. Is there people that need to be signed up? What does that all look like? Or did I miss that?
I don't believe we have started that process at all.
Okay.
So I would say if you're interested, go start attending SIG release and help them come to the list that needs to be created for the 1.8 release.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Cool.
If you're interested, just show up at SIG release for sure.
Excellent. Do we have community announcements? I'm not watching the channel to see if we do. Additional, I'm going to pause while people think if they have any. All right, so I'm going to start wrapping up. We want people to rotate responsibilities for these meetings. So you do not need a buttery radio voice to host and moderate.
Buttery radio voice.
That's me today. I'm using my buttery radio voice. And so, and rotate. So it's really important that we continue to rotate these responsibilities and share them in the community. So please sign up. George, I think, is coordinating our agenda on that. He's raising his hand. Thank you. And this is your last chance for announcements before we close the meeting. Excellent. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining for this meeting. We have one more week before the 4th of July break. And are we having a meeting on the 4th of July week?
I was expecting to, because the 4th of July is Tuesday. So if we have quorum on the 6th, we should. What quorum? I think we should have one on the 6th.
That motion I will second, and we will carry without a vote. That's fine. So we're having a meeting on the 6th, just for planning. So, all right, everybody. Thank you very much. Have a good weekend.